Thank you so much, Ware, and thank you, the bookstore and Town Hall, for having us all here tonight. It's a great privilege to be with you. And I think the talk tonight is on the prophecy of 2012, and I'd like to begin by saying that I believe, are the most fortunate, most privileged people that have ever lived on this planet. Because we live at a time of tremendous revolution. This is the biggest revolutionary time that's happened. I think what we're experiencing today is bigger than the agricultural revolution. It's bigger than the industrial revolution. It's huge, and you're part of it. The indigenous people tell us that every one of us is born into this body, your body, to your parents at this particular time in history because you have a mission. Now, in our culture, we don't spend a lot of time going into our missions. We tend to talk about goals, get good grades, go to a good university, get a good job, find a good spouse, have a good kid, send the kid to a good school to get good grades, to go to a good college. But if you were born amongst indigenous people, almost in the entire world, I've worked with indigenous people on every continent where there are indigenous people. There aren't any on Antarctica. I haven't been there yet. If you were born with any of these people, you would grow up spending a great deal of your life figuring out your mission and how to accomplish it, and your name would change during your lifetime as you approach that. But I think that we're all here, I believe this very strongly, because we have a mission, you have a mission, and you're born at this amazing time in human history that's like no other. And I'm going to talk about the prophecies in just a moment. But I think it's so significant when you really delve into it and understand that for the first time in human history, every person on this planet, in fact, every sentient being on this planet, is being faced by the same crises. It's never happened before. We had blizzards in this part of the country, and tsunamis in Asia, and hurricanes in Florida, but they never impacted the other regions too much. But today, every life form on this planet is impacted by global climate change. Regardless of what you think causes it, it's happening. The glaciers are melting, the oceans are rising. We know that. Every life form on this planet is impacted by declining population, by declining resources that are declining at accelerating rates. And the prices of essentials, food and fuels and other essentials, that are increasing at accelerating rates. Overpopulations, species extinction, we're all impacted by that. Everything on this planet is being impacted. And for the first time in human history, and this is big, we're all talking to each other by cell phones and the internet. Never happened before. A few years ago, I was high up in the Himalayas at about 17,000 feet, standing next to a glacier, talking to a nomadic tribal chieftain up there. And he was lamenting the fact that his people would never have telephones because the lines would never reach there. I'd hear the same thing from people deep in the Amazon. I can walk out of here tonight and call that tribal chieftain. His people have a satellite cell phone. And so do they deep in the Amazon. We're all communicating with each other. We're talking. And we're seeing phenomenal change occur. The Middle East, it started in South America, where 10 countries in the last few years have elected presidents democratically, peacefully, who have said, we want change, no more exploitation by foreign corporations, no more destruction of our environment. 10 countries representing more than 80% of South America. And during most of my lifetime, every one of these countries, every single one of these 10 countries was run for most of my lifetime by brutal dictators, primarily put into power by the CIA and kept there by the CIA. That's all changed in less than a decade. And now we're seeing a huge undercurrent of revolt in the Middle East. We're feeling it at home in places like Wisconsin and many other places. There's something incredible happening. This is an amazing time. And you're it. You're in it. What a privilege. How exciting. What more could you ask of life? Seems a little daunting at times, doesn't it? But that's good, you know. Who wants to have it easy? Challenges are good. And maybe some of you don't feel that way right now, but you will. You will. And these are times that have been prophesized by every indigenous culture that I know, and I've worked with a lot of them. And I start with a little story. Actually, people have always told me I should always start a talk with a joke. But believe me, you don't want me to start a talk with a joke, because I always muff it. But I'm going to tell a little story which is kind of funny, and you can laugh at it. It wasn't funny at the time, but it is in retrospect. I went in the Peace Corps in 1968, fresh out of business school. And the Peace Corps sent me to a training camp in Southern California for 8 weeks to learn Spanish. And if you've ever learned another language, you know 8 weeks ain't a lot of time, you know. And also to learn to be a credit and savings co-op specialist, because I'd come out of business school. And then they sent me to Ecuador. Next thing I know, I'm on this rickety old wooden bus for 2 days, going up over the Andes and down to the end of the road to the Amazon. I'm going to be sent deep into the Amazon. It actually requested it. And so I'm on this rickety old bus that's filled with chickens and goats and pigs and people and babies, and every living creature on that bus was vomiting for most of those 2 days, including me, especially me. Finally, at the end of 2 days, we get to the end of the road. We're in the Amazon. I now got a 2-day walk to the site where I'm supposed to spend the next 2 years. So as I'm walking in, I figured there's people walking out, and I figured this is a good time for me to practice my Spanish. And to my chagrin, I discovered that the people walking out don't speak Spanish. They're Shuar, indigenous people. They speak Shuar. My first experience with U.S. government work, teach me another language for 8 weeks and send me to people that don't speak that language. How many of you have ever seen a shrunken head or a picture of one? Oh, good. Well, that's the Shuar did it. They're the only people, they're headhunters around the world, but the Shuar are the preeminent head shrinkers today. And so I'm on my way in to spend the next 2 years with the Shuar. So I'm really going through a very traumatic experience. I joined the Peace Corps because I didn't want to go to Vietnam. I didn't believe in Vietnam. But believe me, as I'm walking for 2 days in this jungle, feeling very homesick, crying the whole time, nobody can tell because it's the rainforest, you know, it's raining. I'm going in there and I'm thinking, damn, I wish I'd gone to Vietnam. People speak English there. Finally, I get to the site where I'm going to spend the next 2 years, and there's one guy there who speaks Spanish. He's the school teacher. He's from up in the Andes, speaks Spanish. But he doesn't really believe that I speak Spanish. He maintains that I don't. He says he can understand me, but he's not quite sure what language I'm speaking. So I tell him, as I arrive there, he greets me, and I say, so here I am to help you guys form your credit and savings co-ops. Yeah, he looks around and he says, credit and savings? We don't have any money here. Money doesn't last in the Amazon anyway, and plus it's all barter here. You know, you're guinea pig for my bananas. So he says, we requested an agricultural co-op specialist. So I don't know a damn thing about agriculture. So very, very quickly, I discovered that I had absolutely nothing to teach these people. All my years of this vaunted education in the United States had nothing to offer these people. But I also learned very quickly that they had a great deal to teach me. They had a lot to teach me about relationship. They were so into relationship with each other, with the plants and the animals and the rivers, with everything, with nature. All their gods and goddesses are these nature spirits. And that really just means that you deeply, deeply connect and honor the trees and the plants and the animals. And so it was an incredible teaching experience that I had with these people. And the other thing is that because I grew up as a Calvinist in New Hampshire, I come from about 350 years of New Hampshire Yankee Calvinists, New Hampshire and Vermont, we're taught that when you are assigned a job to do, by God, you do it. So every night I got up and gave a talk about the importance of credit and savings co-ops. In my lousy Spanish, which nobody could understand. But a funny thing happened. Every day, every night, more people gathered around me. And it got to a point where people were walking for 5 hours through the jungle, and then they had to walk home. They didn't have flashlights, you know, but in the dark, so they're all coming, and I'm like, thanks, Mom and Dad. Calvinism really works. The school teacher takes me aside at some point, and he says, hey, you know, have you noticed that we don't have any radios here? We don't have any televisions. We don't have electricity. We don't have any newspapers. Nobody can read. We're illiterate. Have you noticed we don't have any of these things? He says, you're it. Saturday Night Live. Every night, you know, the jungle drums, and they use them there. The jungle drums that beat out this rhythm, that there was this tall, gangly, crazy gringo who couldn't speak a language that anybody understood, didn't know how to shoot a blowgun, couldn't track a jaguar, cried all the time, and every night gets up and talks about something that nobody can understand anyway, and the one guy who couldn't understand it says it doesn't make any sense anyhow. He's crazy, and he's not going to live for very long, so you better come see him. And it was very much at that time that I get the message, you know. I got nothing to teach these people, but man, do they have a lot to teach me. And then I got very ill. I lost probably 35, 40 pounds in a week. Hey, I'll sell you that diet. I was dying, and I couldn't get out. A 2-day walk, two-day bus ride. There was no way I could get back to the doctors in the Andes. I was resigned to dying. And then late one afternoon, the school teacher comes up to me, and he's leading this decrepit-looking old Schwa man by the hand. And he says, this guy's the shaman. He can cure you. And I'm like, oh, yeah, right. Like, I'm from New Hampshire. Give me another one. And the old man looks at me, and I can cure you. You know, this is all being translated. So what the heck? I figured, well, what do I got to lose? So this old man, he steps back, and he looks at my feet, and he looks up my body, up to my head, and he looks me up and down, and he stands up real close to me. He's a lot shorter than me. He looks up and he says, you're dying. And that's good, because the Schwa believe in reincarnation, and he figured my life was about as bad as it could possibly get. Time to move on to the next one. So I think at that point I started crying once again, and he says, oh, well, maybe you're not ready, in which case I can cure you tonight. I can shape-shift you out of this. The title of one of my books, I can shape-shift you out of this. So I said, I think I'll take that. And he did. That night he did a classic shamanic ceremony on me. The details are in the book, Shape-Shifting. But to make a long story short, it was an incredible experience. We couldn't talk or anything. He played music, and I went through this vision quest all night long. And what I saw was that my parents brought me up to be very, very hygienic. New Hampshire Yankee Calvinists. We only ate meat and potatoes. You didn't eat onions. You didn't eat garlic. My wife's in the audience. She remembers my parents. They never did eat garlic or onions. You know, nothing like that. You washed your hands about 500 times a day. Very hygienic. Well, now I'm living with the Schwa. And the Schwa have a very different concept of life. Their most popular food is something, it's a kind of beer called chicha. It's made by the women chewing a manioc root and spitting it. Some of you, I think, have been with the Achua. Are there anybody in the audience that's been there? You've had chicha. Isn't it wonderful? So the Amazonian people don't drink the water in the rivers because it's polluted by organic matter. But they drink a lot of chicha because you got to rehydrate. That's the only thing they drink, the spit beer. And you eat these strange things too. Like you reach inside an old rotting log and pull out a handful of squirming grubs, baked grubs, and eat them live. Very nutritious. But, you know, I saw on this, I ate all these things and drank the beer because there weren't any Cliff Bars available. But every time I saw on this journey that every time I ate these things and drank this beer, my mom was standing over my shoulder saying, "Son, it'll kill you." And on this journey that night, I saw that the Shuar are some of the healthiest people I'd ever met. The men are all built like Rambo, right? And the women are pregnant. They're very, very sexy. They're very fertile. People live to be very old. They're hunters and gatherers, so they die sometimes in dugout canoe accidents, tipping over, snake bite. But if they don't die from an accident, they live to be very old. So on that night, I saw that what was killing me was not the food. It was a mindset that had been instilled in me. And that night, I changed my mindset. The next morning, I woke up and I was fine. I fell in love with these people, the Shuar. I spent 3 years in the Peace Corps there. I was in the Peace Corps for 2 years. I spent 3 years. I would have extended more than 3 years if they'd let me, but they wouldn't. I go back a lot now. I have 3 godchildren there. And it was a profound experience. Mindset. And I tell this story because that's where we are today, I think. We must have a mindset change if we want to survive as a species. We are at this revolutionary time. We must shapeshift. We are at a time when what we do know is that the world we've created is a failure. The economic system we've created is a failure. I'm an economist by training. Less than 5% of us live here in the United States. We consume more than 25% of the world's resources. While roughly half the world, 3 billion people are starving to death and are on the verge of starvation. That is a failed system. There's no other way to describe it. It's not a model. You can't sell it to the Africans, the Indians, the Chinese, the Latin Americans. You'd need another 5 or 6 planets just like this one without people to do that. And despite Avatar, it ain't happening. We've got to fix it. We're on an extremely fragile space station. But unlike the one our astronauts built, this one doesn't have any shuttles. We can't get off. We've got to fix it. I have a 3.5-year-old grandson living across the Sound here over on Bainbridge Island where I live. Grant, his mom and dad own Local Harvest, a local organic food restaurant over there in Bainbridge. Highly recommend it. Great food. Every time I take Grant by the hands, this little 3.5-year-old boy, I look at him and my heart just goes out like, what is this world going to look like when he's my age, 6 decades from now? We have to ask that question, and we know if we continue on this path, it'll be ugly. But we've got to turn it around. And we have to understand that the only way Grant or any of our children or grandchildren here is going to experience a sustainable, just, and peaceful world is if every single child growing up in Botswana, in Ethiopia, in Cambodia, in Israel and Palestine, in every corner of this planet, if every child has to have that same experience because we live in such a tiny, integrated planet today, unlike ever before, the only way our children and grandchildren are going to have a world that they will want to inherit is if every child on this planet has this world, and we must face that. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Walking in here, my wife and I passed 2 little girls outside that were hugging this dog of theirs. And whenever I see children, and I hope that every time any of you see children, think about that every child on this planet has to have this kind of a world. Never been this way before. We used to be able to take care of the state of Washington or the country of the United States and to hell with the rest of the world. That's no longer true. We've got to take care of all sentient beings, and not just human beings. So we're at this time of revolution. and it is a time that's been prophesied. So some of those prophecies, a lot of you know of the prophecy of 2012, the Mayan Prophecy, and I take people along with my co-facilitator, Lynn Roberts, to Guatemala. We take groups of people every December to work with Mayan shamans. I'd love to have you come. Go to my website, johnperkins.org. While you're there, subscribe to my newsletter, please. While I'm on that, also Twitter me at economic_hitman. And I'm on Facebook. Let's stay in touch. But johnperkins.org, and we'd love to have some of you come on that trip where we work with these Mayan shamans. And we work specifically, we do fire ceremonies. We do a lot of amazing things around the prophecy of 2012. Now, the prophecy of 2012 is not at all like the Hollywood version. It's not a doomsday prophecy. Could turn into that, I suppose. But the prophecy basically says it's a time when the 17 Mayan calendars all converge and end. And it's said that this is a time to start fresh, a new start for humanity, that we're moving into a new era. And it comes specifically from the Popol Vuh, the sacred text of the Mayans, roughly the equivalent of our Bible, I suppose, something like that. The Popol Vuh says that there's a time in history that's ruled by seventh Macaw, a king, seventh Macaw. He's greedy, he's brutal, he's selfish, and he's been ruling for a long, long time. This is the time that we've been in. And the prophecy says that at this time in history, 2012, the hero twins will come along representing men and women, will come along and kill seventh Macaw, sever his head, in fact, and replace him with one Hunahpu, a new leader who's characterized by compassion, by giving, by cooperation, by a whole new change of consciousness. And that's the time we're in. And the reason that 2012 is important, December 21st of 2012, is because from the Mayan perspective, if you're standing on the major Mayan pyramids, from that perspective, on December 21st, 2012, the sun passes through the great rift of the Milky Way, the center of the Milky Way. And the major ball courts, the Mayans built these amazing ball courts, and the major ones, not all of them, but the major ones, there's a throne at one end where the shaman sat. And if you look straight down the ball court from that throne to the straight line to the very end, on December 21st, 2012, the sun will rise right at that spot. And they've known this for 2,000 years. They've predicted this time for 2,000 years, and they say December 21st, 2012 is not an important date. It's a marker when that sun does that, but it's begun now. We're in that time now. You're in it. You were born into it. And it's going to continue for a while afterwards. This is the prophecy that we are in this time of incredible potential for change. And every indigenous culture I know all over this planet has similar prophecies. Another one is the eagle and the condor. How many people know the prophecy of the eagle and the condor? Pachamama people who've watched the video, been to the symposiums, and I'm going to mention that again later. So the prophecy of the eagle and the condor comes out of the Andes, out of the Amazon, and went up into the Andes, and it traveled around most of the Americas, influenced the Hopi prophecies. And it basically says that it was probably first expressed 500 to 1,000 years before Christ. Nobody knows exactly when. But it said that back in the midst of history, human societies would take two paths. One would be the path of the eagle, the path of the mind, the brain, science, technology, industry. Perhaps we could call it the male path. The other part of society, human society, would take the path of the condor, path of the heart, emotion, passion, intuition, female path. And they would go separate ways. But then during the fourth Pachacuti, and in Quechua, Pachacuti is a 500-year interval, the fourth Pachacuti would begin about 1500. During the fourth Pachacuti, the eagle and the condor would come together and clash. And the eagle would be so powerful it would practically destroy, drive into extinction, the condor. Of course, we know that happened. That prophecy was realized. Columbus, 1492, look what happened to the condor peoples of the world, the heart-based people, the indigenous people. But the prophecy says that in 500 years later, in the fifth Pachacuti, year 2000, there would be the opportunity for the eagle and the condor to fly together in one sky, to soar, to dance, to mate, to create a whole new species, which they say is the Quetzalcoatl, or the Quetzal bird of Central America, the Mayan Prophecy. And what this is about is saying that now we have entered this time of opportunity for the heart and the mind to come together, the male and the female, the technological, the scientific, and the intuitive, the passionate, the heartfelt sides, to come together and to take us to a new level of consciousness. A level of consciousness where we can really understand that we have to cooperate, we have to be compassionate, we have to all work together to create a world that Grant will want to inherit, and every child on this planet. And every one of these prophecies, another one, I'll say one more, in Tibet. Well, I had the exceptional good fortune a few years ago of being in an airport with 30 people. I was leading a group up in Ladakh, Little Tibet, out of Indian Protectorate. They used to be part of Tibet. I was in this airport getting ready to fly from Leh, Ladakh to Jammu, India, and the Dalai Lama and his entourage come waltzing through. And they're going to get on the same flight, and the Dalai Lama is carrying my book, Shape-Shifting. So somebody in our group goes up to his secretary and says, you know, the author of this book's on this flight. Make a long story short, I end up, the Dalai Lama invites me to sit with him in the front seat of the airplane for this whole flight. So we're sitting there talking, and I asked him, I said, Your Holiness, do you know that the prophecies say that the 14th Dalai Lama, you, will be the last? What do you think of that? And he said, well, you know, I think I'll be the last maybe from the Himalayas. Maybe I'll be the last Buddhist Dalai Lama. That blew my mind. And he said, and I said, well, do you know where the next one will be from? And he said, I'm not sure, but I think it'll be from either the Andes or the Amazon. That's why I'm reading your book. As a result of that time we spent together, he invited our whole group of 30 people to his home in Dharamsala several days later to spend an afternoon with him in his living room. And it was enlightening, that's a good word to use. It was enlightening because, well, it was enlightening for many reasons. He said a lot of things, but I was really struck by when he first walked into the room, he welcomed us, and then he said, I just want to say, don't become a Buddhist. The world doesn't need any more Buddhists. But do practice the Buddhist principles of compassion and love. And that hit me like, okay, so this is what he meant about being from South America, where these Andes and Andean people are not Buddhists, and that kind of blew my mind. But what he was really saying is the next leader needs to be someone who believes in compassion and love and doesn't necessarily have to know all the mantras and all the other things that Buddhist scholars are brought up to believe in. It was fascinating to hear him say that. But here's this another prophecy, the prophecy of the 14th Dalai Lama, the last. And he just stepped down about a month or so ago as the leader of Tibet, the political leader. He's still the spiritual leader. But I also had this vision. Can you imagine Easter Sunday? Imagine Easter Sunday. The Pope walks out on his balcony, and he looks down in St. Peter's Square, and he said, just want to say one thing. Don't become a Catholic. So here we are at this time of prophecies, and I think it's really important to understand that none of the prophecies say we will achieve this higher level of consciousness. It's not automatic. We have to do it. You have to do it. That's why the twin heroes had to do it. It's not a leader that does it. Our leaders can't do it. Obama can't do it. Sarah Palin, well, can't do it. None of our leaders can do it. We have to understand they're extremely vulnerable, for one thing. Obama's in a very, very, very vulnerable position. And he can't do it. And when you think about it, we've always had to do it. The Civil War didn't end because Abraham Lincoln found himself in the White House. Civil War ended because we elected a leader that was opposed to seeing the country divided, and then we fought a major war. We sacrificed ourselves to realize that dream of unity. We've always had to do it. We, the people, have to do it, and we have to do it this time. This is the time, and you have to do it. That's why you're here. That's why you came into that body, to those parents, at this time in history. That's why you're sitting in this room right now. We've got to do it. We're going to do it. And we're going to have fun doing it. It's a good time to be alive. It's a good time to create this change. And I just want to take a moment to talk a little bit about, take a look at the clock here, to talk a little bit about how we got here, because I think I have to take a lot of that some of that responsibility. Because we got to this position because of people like me, economic hitmen. First truly global empire in the history of the world. It's a corporate empire. It's not a country empire. It's not the United States empire, really. It's a corporate empire. But it was created for the first time in history, an empire created without the military for the most part. And it's happened many different ways, but perhaps the most common that I employed was to identify a country with resources our corporations covet, like oil. Arrange a huge loan to that country from the World Bank or one of its sister organizations, but the money never actually goes to the country. Instead, it goes to our own corporations to build big infrastructure projects in that country. Power plants, industrial parks, highways, things that will benefit a few very wealthy families in that country, as well as our own corporations, the main beneficiaries. But don't help the majority of the people who are too poor to buy electricity, don't have cars to drive on highways, can't get jobs in industrial parks because industrial parks don't hire many people. And yet they're left holding a huge debt that they can't possibly repay. And so at some point we go back and say, hey, since you can't pay your debts, give us a pound of flesh. Sell your oil real cheap to our oil companies without any environmental restrictions. Let us destroy your rainforests, your deserts, your seas, whatever, your beaches. Vote with us on the next critical United Nations vote. Allow us to build a military plant, a military facility on your lands. Something along these lines. And in the few cases where we economic hitmen fail, the jackals step in. I talk in my books about how I failed with Jaime Roldos, the democratically elected president of Ecuador, and Omar Torrijos of Panama. I couldn't corrupt them. I couldn't get them to buy into the system. And as a result, they were assassinated by the jackals. The jackals either overthrow governments, as they recently did to Zelaya in Honduras, or they assassinate leaders. They're very much involved in what's going on in the Middle East today. There's an amazing behind-the-scenes story in the Middle East today. Fascinating what's going on there right now. In the few cases where the jackals also fail, as they did with Saddam Hussein, they couldn't take him out. His security was too good. He had too many look-alike doubles. Then the military steps in. So you've got this three-tiered approach. It's primarily done by economic hitmen. If they don't succeed, usually the jackals do. If they don't, then the military goes in. And in this way, we've created this empire. It's a corporate empire. It's driven by the people who run our biggest corporations. This isn't a conspiracy theory, incidentally. These people don't have to get together. They don't even have to know each other. But they control our politicians. Nobody in the United States gets elected to a major office without huge corporate support. We're certainly seeing the fruits of that with the Obama administration. I'm not trying to knock anybody here, but it's where we're seeing it. We're seeing it all over the world. The corporatocracy controls the mainstream press, either through direct ownership or advertising budgets. They run the world. Through most of my lifetime, you could look at the globe as this, this big ball with roughly 200 countries, of which a few had a lot of power. The United Kingdom, the Soviet Union, the United States at different times. Today, you'd better envision that globe surrounded by huge clouds that know no national borders, don't respect any particular sets of laws. These are the big corporations. Strike partnerships and deals with the Chinese, the Taiwanese, and the Tibetans, the Israelis and the Palestinians, the Indians and the Pakistanis, with anybody who has resources they covet or markets. And this is the world that we're living in today. A world that's really moved from Several hundred years ago, geopolitics controlled by religious organizations, then governments, now it's corporations. So the question is, what's next? And next has to be us. The realization of the prophecies. The coming together of the eagle and the condor. The Dalai Lama that rises out of a place that doesn't have Buddhism. The prophecy of the 2012, the twin heroes rising up and replacing a brutal dictator with a compassionate leader, a compassionate consciousness. We are at this time to change our consciousness, and we know it's happening. The prophecies are coming true. You know, in about 2000, the indigenous people and we began to get together. That's why books like the ones that I was writing about shamanism never would have sold a copy back in the 70s probably, or maybe a few freaks would have bought them, you know. Some people bought Carlos Castaneda, you know. But the fact is, in the late 90s, the mid and late 90s, people became very interested in shamanic cultures, and the shamans opened up. They invited us to their homes. They invited us to their lands. They opened up to us. The prophecies are being realized, but we have to keep pushing this and moving in this direction. And I think one of the good news aspects of this is that an empire that's run by corporations is an empire that we have control over. Because these corporations only survive because we all buy their goods and services. And the marketplace is a democracy if we choose to make it such. When I went to school in Boston, I couldn't walk beside the Charles River. It was so polluted. Not anymore. We forced the corporations to clean it up. When I went to university, there was apartheid in South Africa. For the most part, we got rid of it because we boycotted the corporations that supported it. We got them to get rid of aerosol cans, destroying the ozone layer, to hire more women and minorities, recently to get trans fats out of their foods and antibiotics out of the chickens. We have tremendous power over these corporations. But now it's time that we get the corporations to change a basic premise. Because beginning in the 70s, and especially in 1980, when Reagan and Thatcher and Odson and a number of other world leaders embraced what I call predatory capitalism, which was espoused by Milton Friedman in the Chicago School of Economics, there became one guiding principle for every major corporation in the world. And that principle is that the only responsibility of business is to maximize profits regardless of the social and environmental costs. That was never true when I was in business school. We were not taught that at all. We were taught that a CEO shouldn't even make that much money, decent living, but he or she needed to take care of their employees, their customers, their suppliers, and the community. Be a good citizen. That all changed in the 70s and especially in the 80s, and ever since, every US president has embraced this predatory form of capitalism, Democrat and Republican alike. We need to change that. You need to change that. Don't buy any more from any corporation that has that philosophy. The new philosophy has to be, yes, give a decent rate of return to your investors. I am a capitalist, basically. There may be better systems. I'd like to see one that would come along, but right now I can't identify one, so I'll try to change this one as much as I can. Let's set a new set of rules out there, establish a new set of rules. Make a decent rate of return, make profit, but only within the context of creating a sustainable, just, and peaceful world. And don't buy from any corporation that won't do that. And you know, we have to take a lot of the responsibility because for far too long we've been sending the message, and let's face it, corporations are just people, you know? Well, you know, I've known in my lifetime a lot of CEOs, a lot of people in high management, and I personally don't know one who wants to see Florida sink beneath the oceans. I don't know any that are bad guys. I know there are some. I know Phil Knight down the road here is a sociopath at Nike. And certainly the people at certainly the people at Enron were sociopaths, and there's a lot on Wall Street that are sociopaths, but there's a lot of people out there that are just receiving a message from you and me. And that message is, give me inexpensive shirt. And if that has to be made in a sweatshop in Indonesia or China by slaves, I'll just look the other way. Give me cheap gas for my car. Don't you dare raise the price of gas. And if that means destroying the Amazon rainforest, I'll just look the other way. We've been doing that. And we've got to turn this around. We've got to say, no more of that. For the first 100 years this country was a country, no corporations could get a charter unless it proved it was going to serve the public interest. Charters lasted on average for 10 years, and then the corporation had to go back and demonstrate that it had done that, served the public interest, and would continue to in order to renew its charter. I think we need to return to that sort of a value system. Corporations need to be good citizens. They need to serve you and me, a public interest, a public servant. They need to take care of us, not just a few people at the top. And we have the power to turn that around. So I'm going to end and go into questions and answers in just a moment, but first just to address, what can you do personally, what can each one of us do personally? Well, I think, part of it is, and I talk a lot about this in the book Hoodwinked. There's 5 different big categories with small categories within that. I can't go into all that, but you can read the book if you want. But I think, and part of it is how we consume or choose not to. But there's another very, very important thing here. And that is that I know that every one of you have passion and you have talent. I don't know what your passions are or your talents for any one of you out there. Maybe I know a few of you. I have a passion for writing and hopefully some talent in it. That's how I choose to direct most of my efforts, and standing up and talking like this. Tomorrow I go down to the Green Festival in San Francisco and we'll be talking to about 1,000 people in a similar vein, moving people. I don't know what your passions are or your talents, but I know you get them. And so if each one of us in this room directs our passions and our talents toward creating a sustainable, just world, a world that little Grant is going to want to inherit, then we will achieve that. You will achieve it. So take your route. What is your passion? What is your talent? There's a young man in the audience I had dinner with, a few people tonight, works for Boeing, and told me about how Confessions of an Economic Hitman convinced him that he could go in and work through Boeing and get Boeing to become more ethical in its dealings with, especially with third world countries. And he's working on that with a bunch of other people there. This is what we need to do. That's his passion and talent. This is what we must do, all of us together, moving in that direction. And I'm really, really hopeful that this is going to happen. I do a lot of lecturing at universities. I just came back from a university in Canada. And I do a lot of lecturing at big business schools, Stanford, Wharton, Cornell, Columbia. And in the last 6 years since Confessions came out, as I meet with students in these places, and also in schools in China and Iceland and Latin America where I also lecture, 5, 6 years ago, I would hear students, when I talked to them, ask them what their goals were. They talked about money and power. I don't hear that anymore, not even at the MBA programs. I hear students today saying, I want to have kids, and I want them to grow up in a decent world. I may have to pay back some big loans, and so I may have to go to work for a big corporation, but I'm going to change that corporation, just like I heard from Eric at Boeing today. So something amazing is happening. We're seeing it in the Middle East, we're seeing it in Latin America, we're seeing it in Wisconsin, and we're seeing it all over. The fact that there's so many of you here tonight, we're seeing it. It's happening. It's in our hearts. We're experiencing it. But we need to push harder. Go into that passion. So I've talked about a young man working for Boeing. I look around, I see a few people out there that are in my generation, which is the 30 and older. You don't believe I'm 30? And I got to tell you, If you're retired, you can't be fired. It's the time to rattle the cage. Get out there and do it. Mentor the young people and really rattle the cage. Spend a night in jail if you never have. Go out and demonstrate like my great mentor Howard Zinn, a wonderful professor, did. The last years of his life, and Noam Chomsky's still doing it. I mean, whatever you need to do, rattle your cage. Bring in this passion. Honor your passion. This is going to be fun to change the world. There's nothing more gratifying than making a better world for my grandson, Grant. And I know there's a lot of passion in this room, too, because I know there's some people here from a wonderful nonprofit organization that I co-founded and am on the board of that we mentioned earlier tonight, Pachamama Alliance. Anybody here connected with Pachamama Alliance, stand up. Stand up and be recognized. All right, you guys are all heroes. Heroes. So, and Peggy, where's Peggy? Peggy, so there's something, this is a commercial break here, but you've got some cards there, and there's a Pachamama Alliance symposium coming. If you want to just tell people when that is. These symposiums are wonderful. I helped design it, so it's great.
He's in it, too.
By video.
Yeah, the symposium is an event that takes place, 4 or 5 hour event, and the purpose is to inquire as to how we can bring forth an environmentally sustainable, spiritually fulfilling, and socially just human presence. So that's what we're all about. It's got a lot of luminaries in it, and it's a real wonderful program. And there's 4 of them coming up. There's also an associated program that Lightbearer is going to talk about coming up too on the 24th. That's for youth. So for the young people, it's called a Wake Up. For us over 30s, it's a symposium. And so there's going to be one at the Seattle Green Fest coming up May 21st and 22nd. There's one on Bainbridge Island on May 7th. There's one in Port Townsend at the Ancient Wisdom Rising Conference on May 19th, and you can go out to the website as well and find others if you're from out of town.
And we'll have these flyers out on the signing table
and it's
afterwards.
just a little handbill because we're trying to save paper. So pick one up. Thank you.
And there's also a whole, thank you, Peggy, and they're amazing programs. It's like, 4 hours or something? Yeah. They're short, they're video, they're exciting, they're fun. I really encourage it. And we've got some programs that we are particularly oriented toward young people, college students. Lightbearer, can you just very quickly, I'm running out of time here, but summarize and find out how can people get more information about those?
Well, you can check out the website. It's generationwakingup.org. We're going to be doing the Wake Up on the 21st of April at Ohm Culture Studios out by Gasworks Park. It's really exciting. Seeing young people turned on, I feel like, there's a lot of brilliance and connection and hunger for meaning right now. And this Generation Waking Up experience is a fantastic, transformative workshop. So,
Thank you. And we've also got Yes Magazine represented. They had a table out here. There'll be a sign-up sheet at the book signing. You don't have to buy a book to sign up to get their free Friday newsletter, which comes by email. I get it every Friday. It's amazing. Yes Magazine, which puts a positive slant on things. There's incredible things going on here. I know, how many people here are involved in nonprofit organizations? Wow, fantastic. Wow, and sorry I can't mention all of you, but there's one that I just agreed to serve on the board of advisors with ClearPath, which works with victims of landmines, particularly in Asia. And Kimon, would you stand up for just a moment, who's in charge of that one, doing great work in Asia. So I say all these things because it's the passion. Pachamama Alliance was started because there was a message that came out of the Amazon. I brought the message back in '93, and now we're in over 50 countries. We have 4,000 facilitators of symposiums around the world. It's in many, many, many languages. It's organic. It's amazing, and it just spreads. And when you have this passion, you can do anything. We can do anything. Weir mentioned that my book was rejected 30 times. Imagine getting 30 rejection slips and you just keep sending the book out again. We can do anything. So I'm going to close with a quote, and then we'll go to questions and answers. But I just feel the enthusiasm and know that you are born into the most incredible time in human history. I was a great scholar of the American Revolution. When I was a kid growing up in New Hampshire, I had ancestors that fought in the Revolution. And I remember I used to think, damn, I wish I'd been born in the 1700s so I could have fought in that revolution. This is a bigger revolution. This is huge. This is global. It's worldwide. It's also a bit more comfortable. We have better toilets. But speaking of the American Revolution, I'm going to close with a quote that came at a very dire time. This was written at a time, you know, George Washington and Martha Washington and Thomas Jefferson, these people were wealthy people in the colonies. They didn't have to do what they did. They stuck their heads in a noose. They would have all been hanged if they'd lost the revolution. We sometimes forget that. They were radicals. They were terrorists. They were traitors to their own government, the British government. But they did it. And then Washington proceeded to lose every battle he fought for a couple of years. It got bad, and the Continental Congress wouldn't support him. If you feel unsupported sometimes, think of how Washington felt. Couldn't get shoes for his men, couldn't get blankets, couldn't get bullets, couldn't get guns, couldn't get anything. He's at Valley Forge. It's really tough. So this quote comes out of Valley Forge, December 1776, Christmas time. And I think it's very relevant to the times we're in right now. Tom Paine wrote, some of you probably know this, "These are the times that try men's souls. The summer soldier and the sunshine patriot will, in this crisis, shrink from the service of their country. But he who stands by it now deserves the love and thanks of man and woman. A generous parent should say, if there must be trouble, let it be in my day, that my child may have peace. If there must be trouble, let it be in my day, that my child may have peace." Paine continues, "I love the man or woman who can smile in trouble, who can gather strength from distress and grow brave by reflection. By perseverance and fortitude, we have the prospect of a glorious future." Perseverance and fortitude, we have the prospect of a glorious future. And so I just want to say that I really look forward to moving into that glorious future with you. We're going to do it together. We're going to persevere. We're going to have fortitude together. And 6 decades from now, Grant, my grandson, is going to look back and he's going to say, thank God those people all came together that night in April, the town hall in Seattle, and every one of them committed to doing everything in their power to creating a sustainable, just, and peaceful world. Thank God you all came together and we all committed to working together, to taking our own individual paths, but all heading for the same destination of a sustainable, just, and peaceful world. Thank you. Okay, we've got 2 microphones. If people have, what I'd like to ask though is that no more than 3 people line up at each microphone at a time, because at some point we're going to have to stop, and I don't want people to left standing. So, yes.
John, thank you so much for all your passion and all the wisdom that you shared with us tonight. It was just a few days ago that I noticed in the Observer an article about, headlined, "How a Big U.S. Bank Laundered Billions from Mexico's Murderous Drug Gangs." 22-month DEA investigation saying Wachovia, now under the tutelage of Wells Fargo, helped to launder $378 billion, what they say is the equivalent of about 1/3 of Mexico's GDP. And just to see the enormity of that. In the book, The Game as Old as Empire, I think there was a mention of a $500 billion money laundering event. But, the corruption that's on that scale, it's just so immense. And, the right wing is... sends out the message against anything one world government. But how do you monitor these immense capital flows that tie dictator to dictator and corrupt official to corrupt official?
Thank you. Thanks. I think it's important to understand that in a way South America is monitoring that today. Mexico and Colombia are two of the countries that are still pretty much U.S. puppets. But most of the other countries in Latin America are standing up on their own. Rafael Correa of Ecuador is an amazing example of a president who happens to have a PhD in economics from the University of Illinois, president of Ecuador. We have a really hard time painting him as anything but a capitalist, because he is a capitalist, and he says, I'm a capitalist, but I don't see any reason why capitalism can't be used to help my people raise themselves up by their bootstraps and using our resources. He says, we don't want any foreign aid. Morales of Bolivia says the same thing. They're all saying the same thing. We don't want foreign aid. We just want to be able to use our resources to a way that helps our people rather than just the big corporations. And incidentally, the Pachamama Alliance, this nonprofit, was very deeply involved with Rafael Correa. We do a lot of work in Ecuador. We came out of Ecuador originally to formulate a new constitution. Ecuador today is the first country in the world that has a constitution that was ratified by over 75% of the population of Ecuador, the only constitution in the world today that gives inalienable rights to nature. Phenomenal. And now Rafael Correa, with the help of Pachamama Alliance, especially our executive director, Bill Twist in San Francisco, who has a background in finance, is working to create a new currency for Ecuador that will not be based on a central reserve type of bank system like what we have here, central bank, but will be based on the value of what housewives do, be based on value of work and contribution rather than just creating money for private use. So we're seeing that in South America. Mexico and Colombia, the two standouts really, and there's tremendous evidence I've seen that I've spent a lot of time in Colombia. I used to own a little house, a coffee farm, an organic coffee farm in Colombia years ago. That the drug wars, to a very large degree, are supported by the CIA. And this is a long history. It goes back to the Opium Wars in China, the British Empire, the Golden Triangle. The CIA needs money, and it can only get a certain amount in its black boxes from Congress. It also needs people that can perform acts of violence. And by supporting drug wars, it does that, it gets both of those. And so I think this banking deal that you're talking about is also connected semi-officially with our government. And what's actually amazing is that it's been exposed in a way that's amazing. But we need to keep exposing it. I'd say to you, you have a passion for this. And you obviously have an interest and talents. So keep exposing it. Get out there, go to work on it. The blogs, I mean, the internet has given us this incredible opportunity where we can all speak out so powerfully all the time. I'm blogging all the time on Huffington Post and CSRY and a bunch of other blogs, and I think, we can speak out. So please follow that line of thinking. Don't let it drop here. Go after those banks. We got to get those banks. They are robber barons. Our world has been stolen by robber barons. We got to take it back. That's one way to do it. Okay, I get very long-winded on these things. That's my passion. Right? Hi.
Hi, I'm pretty new to Pachamama. I just went to the symposium, so I'm just getting started with all of this. So I thank you very much for the time and effort. And if all of you who are here, it's very worthwhile going to. And one of the things, the reason I'm here right at the moment to talk to you is one of my passions is language. And seeing how we've fallen short in some of our languaging and how we've come into compulsion about and forgive me here for using it, have to and need, and being able to step into what our power is now and who I am now and who I'm standing as now. And my question to you is if you'd have time to meet with me and talk about languaging and how we can use our language in speaking to people rather than trying to get people involved, really stating what's true and being here fully present with what is.
Yes, give me your email address after, when I'm at the book signing table.
Yes, I will.
You live here in Seattle?
Yes, I do.
Great. Can you come across to Bainbridge sometime and have lunch at my daughter's restaurant?
I would love to.
All right, I'll meet with you then. Great, thank you. Hi, thanks, yes. There's your passion, language. Great passion. There's a wonderful book that's just out on that too, I'll mention to you.
There's a story that is told about Valley Forge that Washington, when his troops were about to abandon him, he gathered them together and read from Common Sense by Thomas Paine, and they stayed to have that next victory. I've contended for a long time that we need a new set of founders. We're not accelerating the process of mind change at the rate that the events suggest. So I sent you an email Tuesday night saying, how about you as one of the founders?
How about you?
I'm working at it.
I'll do it with you.
And
everybody else in this room, yes.
Well, but the founders were brought together by Benjamin Franklin back in about 1743 with the American Philosophical Society. He began to build that group of founders who did the courageous thing you talk about. In here are 7 projects, if we could find a team of founders coalesced by you, that they could get underway. Yeah.
Thank you. But I think what we need is a team. And so what I would suggest, take a look at this man. If you want to be part of his team and work with him, and I'll work with you too. You're in Seattle?
Yes, Edmonds.
Edmonds, but you can come to Bainbridge, right? To a good restaurant over there.
Absolutely, if I can find you there.
You can find me.
You've got my address.
So contact this man if you want to be part of this new group that we're going to call the Founders Committee.
And you're going to help.
I'm going to help.
Okay, and here's
my wife's here. She's
here's a piece of the puzzle.
Writing all this down.
There's a whole array of new technologies that our scientists have brought forward that are being suppressed at the present time. The founders have got to move forward and bring those into the world.
Thank you.
And I'm part of the scientific community that's working on that.
Great.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, over here now.
Hi. I have a lot
Jeez, don't give me any more assignments, okay?
Okay. I have a lot of hope for the Uncut movement that helped spark some of the biggest protests ever in London. It's growing here. It's an actual anti-corporate movement. It's such a no-brainer. It seems like everyone can realize the logic of why are we cutting social programs when corporations don't even pay their taxes. What advice would you have for how that movement can grow? And because it's such a no-brainer, but there's so many ways it needs to spread out from just that and avoid being suborned by the corporations who I'm sure have many attack dogs on it already.
Yeah, you bring up a really great point here. Thank you. We are in this new time, and we're in a time, during a great deal of my lifetime, I think, for the most part, elected officials wrote the laws in this country, but they don't anymore. Lobbyists write the laws. Most of them, the important laws anyway. They run them through elected officials, but they own the elected officials. And so we're at a time where we can't do what we did in the 60s and 70s. I was a part of the anti-war demonstrations, and we could influence politicians back in those days because they listened to us. In 2003, millions of people demonstrated against the Iraq War. Nobody paid any attention because the corporations were going to make a lot of money off the Iraq War, and they have. And the politicians, therefore, that support them in the war have benefited. But now we're at a time when we have to take a new look at how do we leverage for change. And here's an example. Rainforest Action Network. How many of you know Rainforest Action Network? Yeah, good organization. Been very successful at changing big corporations. And what they've realized is that you've got to go to the bottom line of a corporation. You can't necessarily take an industry like the insurance industry, or the banking industry. You've got to hit individuals. For example, Home Depot wouldn't negotiate with Rainforest Action Network. But an employee of Home Depot sympathized and came to Rainforest Action Network and said, hey, you know what? I've got the code for the PA system. In all the Home Depots, they all have the same code. So on this one particular day a few years ago, 600 people from Rainforest Action Network, volunteers, went into 600 Home Depots, got on the PA system, and said something like, shoppers, 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 go to aisle 13. There's a huge sale on exotic woods, but be careful. You might slip, the floor is covered in the blood of indigenous people. And on and on. 600 stores. The next day, the headquarters of Home Depot were flooded with phone calls. They called Rainforest Action Network, and they signed the agreement that Rainforest Action Network wanted them to sign. Hit the bottom line and keep going for it. We've got to go for the jugular. Here's another example. It's also a Rainforest Action Network example. Citicorp wouldn't negotiate with Rainforest Action Network. They got wind of the fact that the CEO of Citicorp was meeting with all the big executives in Europe, in London on this particular Sunday afternoon was when the meetings were going to start. So Sunday morning, the CEO of Citicorp gets up, goes down to breakfast, gets his newspaper. The back page of the Financial Times or whatever it was he was reading, the whole back page is his picture with a huge banner that says wanted for killing thousands of indigenous people and destroying rainforests. And he knew that everybody he was going to meet with that day was seeing that same newspaper. And then about a month later, he had given $100 million to his alma mater, Cornell, and they were naming a building after him. And so he was going to the ceremony, and he had a couple of his children and grandchildren with him. As they walked toward the building, they're surrounded by pickets carrying the same picture of him with that same sign that says wanted. You can imagine what the grandchildren were saying. Grandpa, is that you? He called Rainforest Action Network and negotiated. This is where we have to go with these things, you know? We can't just take a back seat. We can't be passive. We have to go. These are people, and they're vulnerable, and the bottom lines are vulnerable, but we've got to go after them one at a time. It's no longer just standing against a war or going against an industry like the insurance industry or the banking industry. You've got to go after specifics, and then that'll turn things around. Got to go after Phil Knight. Okay, thank you.
Hi, I do just have a question. So, I'm not going to ask you.
Really?
Yeah, just a question.
That's refreshing.
That's all I got. I know, yeah.
I don't take questions.
Sorry, I could use your help too.
Okay.
We'll figure that out. No. So one of the things that you were talking about when you were talking about the major corporations, the clouds that really run everything, one thing that I found interesting is it seems like, and hopefully you'll know, the actual, main corporations that run everything, because the thing is that they buy other companies that seem like they're, earth-friendly, sustainable, and whatnot, but the big one is like, but it's really Coca-Cola when you think you're buying this other product. So my question is, what are the major corporations that are running our world right now?
Well,
and I don't know if that's simple or not, but it's a question that I was having.
it's not simple because it's constantly changing.
Right.
And they are constantly buying and selling each other. But I think you can say basically all the major corporations out there, pretty much. And there's variations, and we are making headway. I mean, Walmart's not doing a good job, but they're understanding, I think, that they have to do a better job. And we've got to make them understand that more. Now, there is a problem. When we talk about the marketplace as being a democracy, and how every time you shop, every time you buy something or choose not to, you're casting a vote. And I actually think that it's as important, maybe more important than the vote you cast in the ballot box these days.
Definitely.
They go together. I'm all for political activism. I'm not trying to put any of that down. Get involved in politics, but understand that the politicians are not going to change until they can bring the corporations around. because the corporations control them so much. But how do we know what to buy?
Right.
And this is your passion and your talent. You've got to do it, right? You've got to do it.
Okay.
And there's a lot of other people that I say this to. I'll say it, I'm sure, at the Green Festival, too, that see, the music's playing for you. That's a sign.
Excellent.
You're meant to do this.
I knew
The
I was
music
gonna
goes
sign
off, and
tonight.
the band leader strikes, anyway. So there's a technology, that every product can have, technology exists. You can have a barcode on every product, hold your cell phone up to it. You can read off at the life cycle of the product. How much were the people paid that made it? Did they get a fair wage? Are they getting health care? Are they getting retirement insurance? What happens at the end? Does the product get recycled? You can get all that information, just like today you can find out how many calories are in food you buy and how much protein and how much. But we've got to get the corporations to buy into putting that information on there. Okay. Somebody's got to do it, just like somebody had to get them to agree to the truth in lending laws, in which they don't necessarily follow very well, but the facts around protein and what's in the food. We must do it.
I like it. I'm on it.
You're
right
on it.
now.
Good.
Yeah.
And if anybody wants to help her, take a good look. What's your first name?
My name's Leanne.
Leanne. Look up Leanne if you want to help her in this project. We need to get this going. We got one something over here.
Thank you.
Get my exercise.
Speaking of passion, my passion is justice. And a year or two ago, I read your book, and I was so angry. And I'm still angry about that book because part of it, I am so much related to those people whose lives are destroyed because of you and the companies you work for. And I have this idea about America. If you are a criminal, you'll be in jail. I have the idea that whoever is a criminal will be accountable for those criminal acts. And I believe what you have done for 30 years is a criminal act. And you are a free person, you wrote so many books, and you talk about how we can change this world. And how do you feel about that? How do you explain those things to your grandson?
Well, thank you for saying that. It was only 10 years, actually, that I was an economic hitman, not 30, 10. But I don't justify it. I didn't do anything illegal. Unfortunately, these things are totally legal. In fact, I was asked to speak at Harvard Business School to tell exactly what I did. The idea of investing billions of dollars into developing countries to build infrastructure projects, which is what I did, it's what's taught in business schools still today as being the best approach to development. And in fact, statistically, you can see, and I could see, that it increased the economy of those countries. But so at the beginning of my job, I felt this is what we should do. It's what I learned in business school. It's still taught in business schools. And yet what I began to understand is that you can increase the economy of a country like Indonesia or any other country, and yet only a few people at the top are benefiting. And of course, that's becoming more and more true in the United States today. So what I began to understand is that these things that I was doing, although statistically they looked very good, were in fact not helping solve the real problems of poverty. And the more I understood this, the more I realized I had to get out. And I think because I'd been in the Peace Corps, I was in a position to understand it better perhaps than other people in that business, because I could relate more. But there was nothing I did that was illegal. What the jackals do is illegal. I didn't do any of that. And it should be illegal. And I did it for 10 years, and during that period of time, I came more and more and more to understand the terrible repercussions of what I was doing. And finally, after 10 years, I decided I could no longer do it and would devote the rest of my life to exposing it and getting out. So, I have to live with what I did during those 10 years. And my daughter was recently interviewed by a magazine and asked that kind of same question. She's 28 now, runs this restaurant over there, in case you didn't know that. And she said, my dad has to live with what he's done, but I'm glad he did it because now he can be out there and expose the system. If somebody had to do it, I'm glad it was someone that now is spending his life trying to expose that system. And that is my job, and I'm not proud of what I did in that capacity, although it wasn't illegal, it was sanctioned by all the business schools and everyone. But I think it's a very good lesson for all of us, too, because I suspect that every one of us, to some degree, is caught in these compromises. We drive a car a little too much. We don't check on the clothes we buy quite enough. We don't really know whether they're made in sweatshops enough. We all are guilty to a certain degree, and I'm not trying to exonerate myself at all, but I think we all need to become much more sensitized to the repercussions of our actions. I really appreciate you bringing that up. Thank you.
Hi, you mentioned that Obama and other leaders are very vulnerable. Could you say a little bit more about that?
Yes, well, the book I'm writing now actually goes into that in a lot of detail, but to make a quick summary, I guess I'd start by saying, so probably a lot of you are aware that Eisenhower exposed the military-industrial complex, right? A lot of you people know that. And the question we have to ask ourselves is, why did he do it on his exit speech? Why didn't he do it when he was president? Why did he never say another word about it after he stopped being president? And the only conclusion, logical conclusion, is that he knew that was the only time he could get away with it. He knew he was been the top in the military. He knew how vulnerable he was. That was his one chance. Kennedy comes along after that, and he goes up against the system. He was the only president in my lifetime that hasn't had to accept corporate money because his dad basically financed his campaign. Corporations thought he was on their side until he went up against Big Steel. Robert Blau, president of Big Steel, and he had this huge clash. And Kennedy ultimately won it because he had the Attorney General, his brother, on his side. And Big Steel had huge contracts with the military, and he brought McNamara in, the Secretary of Defense, and said, cancel all your contracts with Big Steel. Big Steel finally gave in to him and hated him and resented him after that. And Big Steel at that time was the biggest industry in the country. The country basically revolved around the steel industry in the United States. They had tremendous power. And then Kennedy pissed off the CIA at the Bay of Pigs and again at the Cuban Missile Crisis because he didn't really go after Cuba in either case. The CIA was pissed off at him. Big business was pissed off at him. He was assassinated. And his brother comes along, knows everything, wants to take care of it, wants to get revenge, wants to expose the system, assassinated. Martin Luther King comes along, similar vein, assassinated. Well, after that, presidents pretty much gave in and went along, and there's a lot of detail, and I write about it in my next book with all these presidents. Jimmy Carter comes along after this. You know, he's the next one that's sort of in a position to really do something, but he doesn't. He gives in. He totally refinances Chrysler. He finances the CIA and the Mujahideen, which became Al-Qaeda. He had the most draconian national security advisor anybody's ever had, Brzezinski. And so, but Carter and I like Jimmy Carter a lot as a human being, but he saw the writing. He knew he could only take a few steps. Later on, we know what the Bushes did. Later on, Clinton comes along. I think Clinton really tried his first term, he and Hillary, to change education and health care. They get knocked across the knees with a baseball bat, the old mafia trick. They get read the Riot Act. And then toward the end of his term, he starts talking about how he doesn't really like the Federal Reserve System. And he starts making waves like after he gets out of the White House, maybe he's going to go against some of the policies he supported. So Monica Lewinsky comes out. And if you don't think that was a set-up deal, read some of the more recent books on it. And you know, Linda Tripp was an economic hit woman. And she was Monica's handler. She'd worked for the Pentagon, she'd worked for the Bush administration, she'd worked for the CIA, and she was wired, and she made sure that Monica saved the dress. Now tell me, if you had an affair with the president, would you save the dress? I mean, wouldn't you wash it? I mean, my God. So Clinton gets the message, and now he hangs around with George Bush. I mean, you know, he's totally changed. He got the message loud and clear. The minute Obama walks into the Oval Office, if it hasn't happened before, he understands that today you don't need a bullet. Kennedy's day, everybody knew Kennedy was having affairs with Marilyn Monroe, Angie Dickinson, lots of other Hollywood starlets. Everybody knew that. It was acceptable in its own way. They had to take him out with a bullet. By the time Clinton came around, the morals of this country had changed. And you could take a president down, you could assassinate him with a Monica Lewinsky. That was a character assassination. So you got a guy like Obama. They've already fired a lot of shots across his bow, questioning whether is he really an American citizen? Is he a Muslim? Was he born in Indonesia? I mean, these things have gone out there. Everybody's got skeletons in their closet. And even if you don't have skeletons, the CIA and the FBI can create them pretty well, and the media will go along with it. So presidents and any major politician in this country and throughout the world today knows that they're very, very vulnerable. Very vulnerable. It's got to be we the people that do it. Obama knows this. He's always called on us to do it. We haven't done it very well. We need to do it. We need to do it. We the people must do the change. That's what I mean by presidents are vulnerable.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Just real quickly, just in the interest of respecting everyone's time, I think we're going to have time for 2 more questions.
Okay, and we get 2 people up here, so thank you very much.
So earlier you were talking about the jackals and their involvement in the current Middle Eastern events, and about the behind-the-scenes story of the current Middle Eastern events. And I don't know if you know this from colleagues or from sources that are open to us to read, because I'm from the Middle East and I would like to know what's going on. Like, what's going on there?
Where are you from?
Saudi Arabia.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
I worked in Saudi Arabia as an economic hitman, and also in Egypt and in Iran and Kuwait. I'm pretty familiar. You know, there's a lot of information that comes from a lot of places, but to make a long story short, I think we know that the royal family of Saudi Arabia, the House of Saud, I don't think they were particularly anxious to see Mubarak go. I don't think they're particularly anxious to see Gaddafi go. And certainly the United States government, I think now, I think they probably want Gaddafi to go, Mubarak to go, but they'd really like to replace them with people that have similar policies, different faces and different names. They don't want to lose the House of Saud. I talk in one of my books and then often in my speeches about my connection with the House of Saud and the deal that we struck that kept them in our court and still keeps them in our court. I mean, that was a very, very important deal, the Saudi Arabia money laundering deal, we call it, and I was there doing that. It's in the book. I don't have time to get into it now. But so all this incredible maneuvering behind the scenes that's going on. And it's a long story, but I'm sure you can imagine it as well as I can. But I'll give you one example that's quite poignant to me. On the day that the UN resolution was signed, I can't remember when that was, but about 2 weeks ago, 2.5 weeks ago, that the UN resolution that gave us permission, basically carte blanche, to go in and take out Gaddafi. That was basically what it was. Late that afternoon and evening, I was speaking at the Foreign Press Association in New York City. A lot of the press were UN press at that talk. It was a dinner talk. And then afterwards, they got together with a smaller group of people for sort of dessert and wine or something. The special advisor to the UN Security Council from Africa, an African man, didn't make it to my talk, but he did make it to the dinner. He didn't make it to the talk because they were going through all these negotiations. He came in and sat down, and I asked him, and he had a draft copy of the resolution in his hands, fresh off the press. This is the day that it's passed. It's just passed. And I said, so what do you as an African feel about this? And he said, I'm totally opposed. And most all Africans are opposed because we know that if you guys go after Gaddafi, any president's vulnerable. And we may not like Gaddafi, but the principle. And he said the Africans were opposed. And I said, well, but why didn't they oppose it? And he said there are only 2 African countries on the Security Council, South Africa and Nigeria. They were opposed. They would not pass the resolution. They would stand against it. And he said at 3 o'clock this afternoon, the U.S. called a recess in the negotiations and invited South Africa and Nigeria outside the room. And when they came back in the room, Nigeria and South Africa had decided not to oppose it any longer, but to abstain. You figure what went on outside that room. Follow the money. I don't know what went on. something, and this guy knew, I mean, he was there. He says, God, there they go again.
Yeah.
So there's just an amazing amount of stuff going on behind the scenes, and it remains to be seen what will happen next, because certainly the United States doesn't want to see the Muslim Brotherhood or Al-Qaeda, which is a real possibility in places like Tunisia and Syria, take more power. I can just imagine the jockeying that's going on behind the scenes. But the good news is, I think the people of the Middle East are speaking out. I mean, this is so important, the fact that they are speaking out and using social media so effectively that way and putting themselves on the line. And, who knows where it'll go, but
Yeah.
God bless.
Thank you.
Thanks.